supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
And no nation which expects to be the leader of other nations can expect to stay behind in this race for space.
What does it take to convince you that the dead do not always rest in peace?
Hey, welcome to the Three Beards podcast. We just rolled out our one of the new graphics we just had made there. So, let everybody, please, everybody, let us know what you thought, think of that one. It was pretty cool. It was just an idea came up with, of having Austin's beard abducted in the field and then brought over. So everybody, this time we'd love to welcome Jim Willis. He comes to us, prolific author. I mean, good Lord, 11 books. Pastor for 40 plus years and decided to embark on a spiritualist journey that led him to South Carolina. I mean, I'm holding one that we're going to be talking about tonight, the Quantum Akashic Field. It's a guide to out-of-body experiences for the astral traveler. And so at this time, Jim Willis, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. I love the new graphic.
Well, thanks. Yeah,
I also have to insist, though, that we change the name for tonight only to Four Beards rather than Three Beards. We're right there.
You are more than welcome to the honorary fourth beard slot right there, sir.
Oh, great! Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, everybody. So if you couldn't get it from the title, we brought you on because I really have taken an interest into the Akashic Record, the Akashic, Akasha, field. And one of the other things too, and I was telling the guys, I really nerd out. I really like quantum mechanics as well. And because I told them, I go, basically one of the coolest things is Schrodinger's cat. How you have it's the cat's hooked up and it's getting either equal amounts of poison, vitamins, and until you observe it, that's when reality is, that's when reality is created. And that's, so like this, this is all wrapped up nicely into a nice package, here in this book. So this is what, now if they go to your site, can they get a signed copy from you?
They can't get a signed copy because it all comes from the publisher or Amazon.
Okay.
And I don't have any to send out. So, but I'll tell you what, if anybody really wants one, they can contact me through my website and I'll send them a sticker or something they can put inside it. How about that?
A book, yeah, awesome. Yeah, so Jim, JimWillis.net is I could bring that up here too myself here real quick to show people. That's a cool thing that we can do here. So we bring it up here, go to JimWillis.net, check him out. It talks about his books and the different events that we used to be able to do on a regular basis. Yeah, thanks to the new modern realm that we're in. But I was going to ask you about this picture. If for anybody that can't visually see it, it looks like you're in a stone structure. Which structure is that?
I am in Cornwall. There, it's called a fugu. And it's a fugu. Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. It's very ancient. This one where I'm sitting right now, it's underground, and that light that's coming in the tunnel behind me, that is human made. In order to get into this for the first 6,000-7,000 years, it was there. You had to crawl in on your hands and knees through this little short tunnel and get inside. And it existed underneath the village. And the neat thing about this is we don't know for sure what happened there, but this was underneath the village. It was where probably the elders or the shaman, the leaders of the tribe would probably crawl down there. And the kids probably didn't know it was there. This was a
Wow.
whole secret world that existed underneath them. And so probably when it came time for the kids to have their initiation into adulthood, you know, in our society, we just give them a driver's license and say, go. But down there, it's a whole different ball of wax. When you were becoming when you were no longer a child and you were going to become an adult, man, you had to get down on your hands and knees and stomach and crawl into this underground thing that you've been playing over for your whole life. You didn't know it was there. And it was a way to symbolize, probably, this is opinion, of course, but it was a way to symbolize the shamanic world that's going on underneath this one. The shamanic idea of life is that it exists on 3 levels, usually 3, sometimes many more, but there is a level below us, which is the level of the animal spirits and the earth spirits. And then there's the middle world where we live. And then there's the upper world, which is shared by things, the birds, eagles, hawks, fairies, the flying creatures, and all that kind of thing. So when the kids came time to become adults, they would crawl down there and probably go through some kind of an initiation ceremony. We don't know for sure what. But when I went down there, I was just fascinated. I was asked to go over to Cornwall, 5 years ago, I think it was, and give a talk over there to a group called the Parallel Community on the roots of worldwide religion, the commonality. It was called One Ring to Rule Them All. The common base that was down there for all world religions. And while I was there, for part of the time I was there, I was staying at the house of John and Jill Moss. John was very influential for a long time. He had a high-ranking position with the Society of British Dowsers. As a matter of fact, I'm doing a webinar with them next month, about 2-3 weeks, I guess, about dowsing. So while I was over there, we had a chance to go to all these ancient sites and all these ancient rocks and the Merry Maidens. And I had a pair of dowsing rods with me, of course, and so did he. So we were able to douse all the earth energies over there. And, but I got underneath there. Matter of fact, I think the other picture on that website is one that he took also. It was me leaning up against one of the rocks at Merry Maidens. Yeah, it is. This advertises, you can find this video on my website too. We're doing a series of right now, probably about 6, I think, videos on how to dowse from the very beginner, right through the expert.
That's awesome.
And just really, really fascinating, dowsing for earth energy. So I had a great time. Had a really great time with them.
That's cool.
So, yeah, when you were over there. Oh no, go ahead. Sorry, Chris.
So if anybody wants to find that video, when is it going to be released? And
it's already out. The first video is already out. The second one is already in production right now. My daughter Jan is also my tech expert and my publicist and my person who tells me how to get microphones and earphones and all that kind of stuff. She does all that stuff, and she's working on the video right now. Should be out probably another week or 2, and then I just recorded a third one about dowsing that we're going to have up. So they'll be coming along quite often, and if you follow the website, it'll be advertised when they're up. But they're all on YouTube, so they're easy to get to.
Now,
well,
did you
look like you need to catch up on the video?
Now, when you went over to England, we just had Maria Wheatley on last week. Yeah. Were you able to meet up with her? Did you?
No. I had a tough time because my schedule was so packed. I had to do this one speaking engagement down in Cornwall, and then it was another craziest experience. If you got a minute, I'll tell you the whole story.
Oh yeah,
please do. A couple of minutes, but
yeah, please do.
When I retired up to the woods, I had been a Protestant Christian minister for 40 years, and I retired. My last church was down in a little place called Port Orange, just south of Daytona Beach, down there where you guys are. And when I retired from there, I came up here to the woods of South Carolina because when I went into ministry, I thought like we all did when we were young, back in the 70s, that we were going to be surrounding ourselves with this spiritual community who was just interested in spiritual growth, and life was going to be this, head in the clouds, growing every day, learning more and more about God and all that kind of stuff. But I soon learned it just didn't happen that way. When you're a minister, Christian minister, or pastor of a church, it's like every other job in one sense, and that's that there's always something else to do. You're always working toward the next church service,
Yep.
the next speech, the next teaching thing. And of course, I was also teaching in the college down there. I was teaching not only world religions, but I was also teaching lower brass, trombone, trumpet, tuba, French horn. And so my life was so busy, and I was so tied up doing all this stuff. I never had time to get to grapple with this spirituality that I've been preaching about my whole life. So I came up here to the woods to get away, and just I was going to go on retreat. I was going to come up here. We had to build a road back to where we live in South Carolina. I had built a house back here myself. I had been a part-time carpenter for most of my life too. So I built the house, and we moved in, and it was just I had a Bible verse in my mind. It comes from the Old Testament book of Genesis, where I read the story now metaphorically more than historically. But the story was that Jacob and Esau were two brothers, and they got into this big fight, and Esau threatened to kill his brother for stealing his birthright. So Jacob had to flee, and he ran up probably near the place right now where Göbekli Tepe is causing all the headlines up in Turkey. And anyway, after a long time out there, he came back, and he was about to be reconciled with his brother Esau. So the night before, he was worried. He didn't know what kind of a reception he was going to get, and he was pacing back and forth. And the story says this man appeared to him, and they began to wrestle, and they wrestled all night together, a long wrestling match. And as the day began to dawn, Jacob said to this person he was wrestling with, he discovered that he had been wrestling with God. And he said, I will not let you go until you bless me. So, wow. Okay, wrestling with God, I will not let you go. So when I came up here to the woods in South Carolina, I said to God, literally, I will not let you go until you bless me. It's you and me, no church, no anything. I'm going to come up here and stay for 1 year, live in the woods, be a little bit primitive, and just get to know God. And lo and behold, God answered my prayer, but not in the way I expected. I didn't come to know God as in the Christian context, but in a way that would have been very comfortable for those shaman who we talked about earlier in the show. So anyway, with this experience, wrestling with God, and I will not let you go until you bless me, I was asked to go to Cornwall. And when I finished speaking with them, I couldn't stay to meet too many people over in England because I had a quest that I had to go on. My great, I don't know how many great-grandfather was a minister, a clergyman, and he preached in this little church in a little town called Compton, which is up northwest of London. The church still stands, and I had to go up there and be in the church where my great ancestor used to preach. So when I finished with my people down in Cornwall, pictures which we showed earlier, I went up to Compton, and I walked into the little church. I met the historian, stayed in a wonderful little bed and breakfast, and went to the town pub and had fish and chips and all that kind of stuff for dinner. It was just wonderful time, great people. So the next day, I met the town historian, took me into the church, and I was able to go up into the pulpit and stand where my great ancestor stood. She showed me the little plaque that was on the wall that had his name as one of the former ministers. And from that pulpit, you can look at the walls and see the stained glass window he would look at every single time he preached. And a stained glass window, which you could only really see well from the pulpit, was, here we go, a picture depicting Jacob wrestling with God, saying, I will not let you go until you bless me.
Wow.
That's awesome.
He looked at that stained glass window every single Sunday, and then a couple of 100 years later, his descendant comes here retires to the woods with that very same Bible verse in mind. Yeah, I'll tell you, the hair stood up in the back of my neck. I don't know how his spiritual DNA was passed on to me, and I had no idea what he would think about his progeny now becoming more of a shaman than a minister. But it was really quite an experience.
Well, I was glad you got to that, because that was one of the ones I was gonna ask you about that, because I heard it in another interview you had. I believe it was with Barbara DeLong.
Oh, could be.
Yeah, and it was. I really liked that story, and this kind of the way you did that, it kind of ties in really nicely to the way, like the Akashic Record, and stuff, to where this is something I was trying to explain to the guys. I go, it's so hard, it just off the surface, just to bring in somebody that doesn't know what it is and just jump them right in. It's like, here, now do you understand? No. I go, yeah. So I mean, if you can give us the 2-minute breakdown of what the Akashic, just go through. Basically, for the people that may not understand it, start from the beginning.
It's really crazy, because the Akashic field and the Akashic records. The Akashic field is really associated with not the old shamanic tradition nowadays as much as it is with quantum physics, because there was a tremendous breakthrough that happened about 100 years ago, when scientists began to understand that there was a whole quantum realm that existed below us, and it was the realm of a crazy place where things just don't make sense, like Schrodinger's cat in the box. And the idea that we can create our own, we do create our own experience simply by looking at it, by seeing it in my mind. Hugh Everett came along and gave us the many worlds theory that says that over and over again, when you go whenever you make a measurement, he called it, but it's an observation or a choice or something like that, that basically the world splits and there become two of you, and one of you makes one choice and one of you makes the other choice. Now, this sounds really new age, far out, wacko.
It does.
But real scientists are looking at this, and this is what the math seems to show. So when these scientists began to understand this weird, counterintuitive realm, and it was called the Akashic field, and it got its name really because they wanted to go back into the Sanskrit and try to come up with an old Sanskrit from the Hinduism, from the Sanskrit language, which is a beautiful, beautiful spiritual language. It's the field where all potential exists and all possibilities exists. Plato talked about this when he said there are two different concepts. One is the concept of horse, and one is the concept of horseness. A horse comes and goes. A horse dies and another horse comes along, takes its place. So we look at the horse, but a horse is an expression of what Plato called horseness, or the idea of a horse. And that's what the quantum record is really all about. It's about that potential and about the possibilities. In other words, we aren't humans in the Akashic field, but there is humanness, and we are living out that reality, the reality of humanness. When the quantum physics, the physicists began to discover this through their really complex mathematics, when they began to discover this field and show all the possibilities of many universes and many realms and many different possibilities of existence, many different us people, who live in experiencing different lives. When they began to discover this, I think what they found was the landscape that had been discovered not just 100 years ago by quantum physicists, but thousands of years ago by shamans. Shamans learned how, through meditation, to go to this landscape. And there they found all this fantastic stuff. And they talked about hybrid creatures, which looked like people but had wings, or that had animal faces or something like that. Now, does that mean that these kinds of people, these kinds of entities really existed in the quantum realm? Not necessarily. I think what it meant was that what they saw there was so outside of our own experience that when they came back into they had to use language to describe what they had seen. And they couldn't say what I saw was this. All they could say was what I saw looked like this. And now I understand. And you can find these in the great religions of the world too. You can read the book of Isaiah in the Old Testament of the Hebrew Scriptures of the Christian Bible. Isaiah talks about being an out-of-body experience, taken up to what he called the third heaven. And there he saw these creatures that looked like men, but they had the faces of different animals, and they had wings, hybrid creatures. Ezekiel talks about them. Enoch in the Old Testament book of Genesis talks about them. And of course, in the book of Revelation, it's full of them. I think what happens, even in the great religions of the world, these original founders of these religions are discovering something that the shamans have discovered years ago. So what am I saying? That Isaiah was a shaman, Ezekiel was a shaman, John, Jesus were shaman? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And they had shamanic experiences, and then their followers would try to describe those experiences. And what we have in our religions of the world today is a bunch of laws and dogmas and doctrine that are wrapped around that original shamanic experience. So I don't think you have to leave your religion behind to talk about out-of-body experiences and that kind of thing. I just get a kick out of it. We're going to be, we came through recently the season of Christmas, and a lot of people who were in my church, Christians, would say, we don't believe in other dimensions. We don't believe in people coming from other dimensions. And then at Christmas time, we would stand up and sing, "Hark the Herald Angels Sing," or "Glory."
I'm glad you brought that up, because
they would talk about angels coming out of there. Yeah.
I've always talked about that, because you'll get to somebody and they're like, "No, this doesn't exist." I'm like, okay, let me break this down to you. Every Sunday, you believe that these individuals just transported, just suddenly left this plane and went to some other area. They came out of nowhere. They've magically come back to life. I go, everything I'm describing right here, this is paranormal. Yeah. This is the spirit that's described everywhere. You're telling them that they're false. That's a false god. You're doing it. You believe the same exact thing. You're just calling it. They're calling it the great bird in the sky, and you're calling it Jesus. I go,
an angel or what?
Yeah. I go, it's the same thing. And everybody, and when you get it, they're like, no, and then they walk off. You're like, I don't know what to do here. I'm amazed.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal, and you find it not only in Christianity, you find it in Judaism, you find it in Islam. I get a kick out of in Islam and in Judaism and in Christianity. We have this angel named Gabriel, this entity from another dimension. Body of a human being, but he flies, and so it's a hybrid. He comes from another dimension. He speaks to Mary and says, "You're going to have a baby." He speaks to Muhammad and says, "Write the Quran. I'll dictate it to you." He speaks to Daniel in the Old Testament, the same entity with the same name and the same description, coming out of the same place. And there it is, the three great monotheistic religions of the world. And they all have this same common denominator. It's to me, it's just phenomenal. It really is phenomenal.
Across the world, I mean, we talked about the way you're saying, like the hybrids. Look at how many cultures have that serpent creature or the winged, bird. Like Egypt has those symbols. Has that iconic, imagery everywhere.
Yeah. You can take the same iconic imagery of that shows up in Mayan culture and in pictures. It's a picture of a human being who looks like he has fish scales with the head of a kind of a bird and wings. You can see that exact same picture on the walls at Luxor in Egypt. and it's just the very, very same thing. They're all carrying this little handbag. Graham Hancock calls it a man bag. I like that. He was asked one time what was in the bag, and he said, "Well, it was a shaman. Probably he was carrying his stash." But at any rate, he had this. They had this bag. You can see those same bags pictured on the rock, Pillar 21 at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. There's 3 of them on the top of that pillar that look exactly the same. Now, what were they? Some kind of a symbol of office, obviously. Something really unique. To me, it's just fascinating. I can't believe it's a coincidence. I think it's all pointing to a specific visitation where the shamanic component is found at the beginning of every one of these religions. And
I'm trying to find that image for you too, just so I could show it here.
Yeah, if we could just open our eyes today, I think we'd find it. And people say, well, where's the evidence of it? I think there's evidence all over. There's 2 great lines of evidence that I think we really need to study. The first is what I like to call evidence in stone. All of these megalithic creatures, the megalithic boulders that weigh tons. How did these people just wake up one day and decide to build a monument like Göbekli Tepe? How did they do it? Where did they get the culture?
Was that the vulture stone? Just curious. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
The which
one? Is that the one that's called the vulture stone?
The vulture stone.
Okay.
Yes, that's
okay.
Right.
Yeah, I'll get that image.
Yeah.
So continue.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's right. So we can look at these megaliths. I mean, we know they had some kind of technology because we couldn't build some of the stuff that they built. So we know they did it. That's what I call evidence in stone. But I also like to talk about evidence in story, and that's the similar mythology that you find in South America, Central America, the West. You find it in Mesopotamia. You find it in Egypt. You find it up in Anatolia and Turkey. I'm leading a group next September. We're COVID permitting. We're going to Turkey, and we're going to be spending 2 days with this group. I'll be leading it in September. And we're going to be up there at Göbekli Tepe, where we can see this particular stone right there. You see those 3 bags on the top? They look like Yep, right. And they all have a little handle. You'll see those same things pictured, like I say, from Anatolia here from Egypt, all the way over to Central America, to Peru. They're always listed, and just absolutely fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and that's the part that one of the things that's cool about your book is where you're bringing this thing up is that this wasn't just in April. She was just commented, that they didn't just make them up. And that's the part I loved the way you describe it, is that they're not just sitting here, just like she said, they're not making these images up, because what is the chances that all these unrelated cultures come up with the same exact
image?
But like you said, if you were visiting this thing, I mean, the way I like to describe it to people, have you ever seen the camera image? Like when somebody does it like with a mirror, and you just see that mirror image that just goes for on and on and on.
Yes.
That's the way I like to describe like what you're talking about with all the dimensions. It's just like every single one of those images is like the intersection of a whole nother dimension, where it's just at every point, that image of you has met up in that location from a different thing.
Yeah.
But you've all met up in that one spot, and it just kind of goes on for infinity in all those different possibilities.
Yeah.
And somebody, like you said, the shaman is able to go, tap into this, and that's what they're seeing. And they're able to see these things. Like you said, how do you describe, if you go into the state, how are you going to describe to, the 3 of you, if all of a sudden I see some flaming half, with 2 legs and the rest of it is a tree. Mm-hmm. And it's talking. I go, I'm not going to be able to accurately describe this because how did you phrase it in that last interview? You said we're trying to use our language and our experiences to match something that doesn't, it doesn't work together.
Yeah, and it's really a simple concept when you come right down to it. We are surrounded by a 5-fold fence, I like to call it, the 5 senses, touch and taste and smell and seeing and all the 5 senses around us. Now, these are good things. They've evolved to help us live in this world. But we know that there's stuff that we don't experience through the 5 senses. For instance, we know that microwaves exist we can't see them, but they're light waves way above anything that we can see. We know, and same thing with sound. My dog hears stuff that I can't possibly hear, way up above my hearing, and whales converse at a much lower language, a much lower amplitude than we can pick up with our ears. So these five senses are good, because if all that stuff came through to us, we'd probably go crazy. It's just too much information. So the secret is to get outside of those five senses. I call that our perception realm within the fivefold fence. And an out-of-body experience is nothing more than, in my case, in meditation, going outside of those senses and perceiving the much bigger reality. We like to say that reality is everything that exists here within our fivefold fence. If we can't see it or touch it or taste it, it doesn't exist. Well, no, This is our reality. It's not the reality. There's a much bigger reality out there. And if we can get outside that fence and experience that, the trouble is that language was invented specifically to describe stuff inside the fence. Now, when you get outside and you experience a whole new reality, how do you do it? You're trying to bring sense to it. So your mind goes through the Rolodex of your experiences and says, well, this isn't really what you saw, but it was kind of like this. And then you try to use that kind of language. And I ran up against this all the time. And when I was writing Quantum Akashic Field, because how do you find the language to describe basically the indescribable? Really, it was a chore.
Yeah, he got the picture up there again to show you, and that's where it's so cool when you talk about this, because it's one of those, you can't, people, they have experts, like they know this information, but nobody has a truly grasp of the quantum realm because it has infinite possibilities. Yep, there's no way you can say, well, this is what it is. No, because what you think it is exactly what it isn't.
Yeah. I think in a certain sense, every single one of us has out-of-body experiences to a certain extent when we go to sleep at night. Sometimes we have dreams that are much more vivid than other dreams. I mean, sometimes it's just our minds just doing weird things. But sometimes, have you ever had that idea? You wake up from a dream and you kind of felt like somebody was trying to tell you something? Like there was a message in this dream somehow, and you find the symbolism, and you understand that symbolism is an attempt to explain something that you couldn't really understand, but you knew you experienced it. And then so you have the symbolism.
I had that 2 weeks ago.
Those are the scary ones.
Yeah.
It was, just to get those ones that are just like, I don't understand this.
Yeah.
It makes no sense to me.
Yeah. Well, I talk a lot about this in Quantum Akashic Field because basically I use a lot of my own dream records and my own dream journals in that book to try to talk about it. The first time it happens to you, and I do outline a fivefold process there of a meditation that I use that helps me in out-of-body experiences. But when you experience this for the first time, it's so wild that sometimes you just snap right back into your body again. And I don't want to imply that this is really easy, or I don't even want to imply that you're some kind of a spiritual guru if you can do it. And if you've never had an out-of-body experience, you're just not in a club. I'm not saying anything like that. But I am saying that it is a reality. I had a good friend of mine. One time I got a call in the middle of the night, 3:00. A member of my church, an older man with my church, was dying. And a nurse called me up and said, Reverend Willis, I know it's 3:00 in the morning, but Bradley's not expected to live through the night. Can you come and see him? He's calling for you. And I said, of course. So I got up, put on my clothes, and drove down to the hospital. I walked in. I could tell right away Brad didn't have long to live. This guy was an epitome of what we all strive to do. He had a doctorate in education. He started a university, which is still in existence. He was a pillar of the community. He had made a small fortune along the way and was very generous with his money. He was a deacon in my church, and he would serve communion, and once in a while lead in prayers. And it was just, you would think that this guy was just the kind of guy we all strive to be. So I didn't need to mess around with him. So I just took his hand. I said, Brad, are you ready to go? And he looked at me and burst into tears. And he said, Jim, I've done a lot in my life. I know it. I'm not just being modest. I'm proud of my life. But the one thing that was most important, I never did. And I said, what's that, Brad? And he said, I never prepared for this moment.
Wow.
Now, I was really lucky because he didn't go that night. He lasted for 10 more days, and I spent a good part of every one of those days with him. And he was, I don't know if I taught him anything, but he sure taught me a lot. One of the great things that he taught me was that this life that we live, we think it's all there is, and we think when this body dies, we go in it. It just doesn't happen. And when you start to have out-of-body experiences, you realize this is just one incarnation that we're going through. This is just one body that we have, and when we die, this body does, but our consciousness returns to the Akashic field, taking with us all of the experiences that we had. And that's what's in the Akashic records, all of the experiences of everybody who ever lived. Even Albert Einstein and Stephen Hawking said that, information cannot escape a closed system. It is here. And that's the purpose of our life, is to experience both the good and the bad. It's a dualistic life that we lead in. And when we experience it, we go back to it. And why not, rather than be like Bradley was, rather than say, I never prepared for this moment, why not spend our life in out-of-body experiences to explore those realms and to see what's there? So when it happens to us, we're not taken by complete surprise.
I got a couple of questions, spear off of that one. I was just going to ask, like the out-of-body experiences, this description, like a lot of people, everybody kind of has that experience where you're sleeping and then it feels like you fell. Like when you wake up, it feels like you drop into bed. And I've heard that described like you were in a point to where you were starting to have an out-of-body experience. And that's the part when you reconnect, it's just that snap. Like, I feel like I just fell. I mean, so do you agree with, like that could be a possibility?
Yeah, there's all kinds of images. In my own case, for instance, I discovered when I have a real out-of-body experience in a dream, it always ends the same way. I forgot where I put my car. I'm looking for my car. I can't find it. I know it's out there somewhere and I can't find it. And I'm absolutely convinced that what that means is I've been out of body, and my body symbolizes the vehicle where my spirit, the vehicle that carries my spirit. Yeah. And so when I'm finished on an out-of-body experience, there comes a time when I have to look around and try to find my body, find the car, find the vehicle that carries you through life. And there's all kinds of experiences like that is just wonderful. The other thing I've discovered, and I've discovered this, a lot of people who call in to shows and stuff when I can talk to them and they start describing their own out-of-body experiences. A lot of times they'll say that they receive some kind of a teaching. And I always jump on that. And I say, did it come to you sentence for sentence, word for word, like we communicate? And they said, no, it comes as a block of teaching that somehow I don't get it sentence by sentence. It's a block of teaching in its entirety. And somehow I just understand it. That's very common to people who have out-of-body experiences and receive messages from the other side.
Yeah. So that kind of and then the second part of that was too, where you mentioned Einstein, Hawking. I've always been convinced that you have certain Leonardo da Vinci, you have Nikola Tesla. These people tapped into this Akashic record. And I think like for me, I wanted to ask you, do you think that when you open up yourself to it, like you can tap into this in a brief moment, but if you do too much, then it overloads the system, like how Tesla started to go crazy at the end.
Yeah.
With pigeons.
It could. I said earlier that our five senses they kind of filter out a lot of stuff. People like Tesla, people like Mozart, they tap into that Akashic field and all of a sudden just hear these things. Mozart would sit down at the piano at 6 years old and play complete piano concertos, that he just received it as a block and boom, there it was. and it drove him crazy. It drove Tesla nuts. You remember that great song? Well, I guess I'm showing my age here. Don McLean, Vincent, Starry, Starry Night.
Yep.
And on that starry, starry night, you took your life as lovers often do. I could have told you, Vincent, this world was never meant for one as beautiful as you. It happens a lot. A lot of very, very intelligent, genius people. It's too much, and they can't handle it. Or what sometimes is worse, they can handle it, but they try to express it to others, who then criticize them and say, "Oh, come on, stay in your place. You're being too much, everything else," and it drives them to suicide because they just get so depressed. Hugh Everett was a classic example of this, a fantastic physicist who is now studied at MIT, but he was the one who gave us the whole idea of the multiverse. And he was laughed out of his job. He couldn't get a job as a teacher. One of the most brilliant physicists who ever lived.
Yeah.
He couldn't get a job as a teacher. It's probably well that he didn't, because he went to work for the government. And while he was working, you remember the Cuban Missile Crisis with John Kennedy standing off Nikita Khrushchev, and the whole idea of mutual assured destruction that marked the Cold War. That was Hugh Everett's contribution. He may have saved the world by getting kicked out of physics. He died thinking he was a failure. Nobody paid attention. He died thinking he was the dumbest thing to come along the pike, because obviously nobody believed what he was saying. Died much too early. And
that's a shame too.
Yeah.
Because
But when you tap into the Akashic field, that's when you got to find people like you that I can relate my experiences, and you can tell me, no, you're not crazy. It's just you had an out-of-body experience. I couldn't just go to a random person and say, hey, well, this happened to me in my dream last night, and I'm sure that this is how it went. Oh, you're nuts. Yeah.
That's predominantly what you get. And you remember if this is me saying, no, you really had a real out-of-body experience, and this is from a guy who didn't even believe in this stuff for the first 60 years of his life. Wow. I was totally left brain, religion and science, and I didn't believe in any of this stuff. But then all of a sudden something happened, and I came out here deliberately to seek it. Wrestle with God. I will not let you go until you bless me. And lo and behold, God did just that. And I don't think I'm crazy. Do I sound crazy? To kind of piggyback on something you said earlier. If God didn't know there was other entities, why would he have wrote in the Bible? There's no footnote in the Bible saying that I will worship no other gods before me or after me. So if he had in his mind that there was other entities and other stuff like that, why did he write it if people don't believe that? Because there's got to be other things in the rim and the Akashic records and so forth. I'm going to have to come and talk to you guys again after April 1st, because on April 1st, my next book comes out, and it's called Censoring God. And it's about the books of the Bible that didn't make the final cut. And it's about the books of the Bible that the committees who put the Bible together didn't want us to know. And I talk about that very same question in the book Censoring God. So I don't
read it right now, but I have a Gnostic Bible behind me. The Gnostic Gospels.
Yeah.
So yes, definitely.
I talk a lot about Gnosticism and Censoring God too.
I'm going to order that book.
Yeah,
going back to what you said, you said that you asked him if he was ready. You probably have an answer, but how do you know when you're ready?
Good question.
It's just one of those unanswerable questions, because it's not your time, but it's like,
I guess it's gonna
one of those things, like, where do you go after death? You don't know, because
maybe you hear a great voice from heaven saying, "Ready or not, here you come."
It's time.
Ready or not, here I come.
There comes the time when we're going to go, and the best thing to do is because let's face it, the first out of body experiences I had, I was new to it, and it was terrifying sometimes, and sometimes it was so much joy I didn't want to come back. Sometimes I want to come back when you come. Now, I'm not implying here that I can do this whenever I want. It's quite frankly, in the last year, it's been really tough because when I was doing Akashic Field, when I was writing Akashic Field, I was totally ensconced in the book, and I was meditating every single day. You have to find the right time for you for meditating. If you do it when you're too tired, you're going to fall asleep. If you do it when you're jazzed up in the morning, first thing you're thinking about the day is going to come, your mind is just running all over the place like a scared jackrabbit, you know. So you have to find it the right time. And for me, that time was 3 o'clock in the morning. I always woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning for some reason. I had had enough sleep to where I was rested, but I still wasn't quite awake. So my mind was pretty much a thing. And I discovered since a quantum Akashic Field came out, and I've been doing a lot more, mingling and talking to people about it, giving some talks or talking to you guys like this and hearing from people who come, write to me at the website and everything else. I discovered that when you go back into the world again, all of a sudden your life speeds up and it becomes noisy and it becomes confused. And nowadays with all of the news that's on the television, and it just ties up your mind, and your mind is seething with all of these ideas. And it's very difficult to come down to that one point focus. My wife and I were talking about this just the other day. When we first came out here, for the first couple of years we were here, every morning we would get up, pour a cup of coffee. We'd go out and sit in the woods and watch the sunrise, and watch the animals open up, watch the squirrels come down, hear the dawn chorus of birds, the deer would come by and everything. It was just beautiful. Every morning we did that. Somehow now, with all the news going on, with all the stuff going on in the country, now we get up, pour a cup of coffee, and turn on the television.
Yeah.
And it does affect your meditation. It does affect your one point focus. And it's hard nowadays. So all I can give people the advice: stick with it as best you can, and don't be discouraged. Anything helps. Yeah. Janet says up at 3 a.m. every single night. Janet, if you're up at 3 o'clock, that's a great time to meditate.
Yeah, I was just gonna comment 4 a.m. for me. I have to be up. I wake up normally about 5:30 for work, but 4 a.m. it's like sometimes I can't go back to sleep. I don't know what I was thinking in my dream, but I'm up at 4 o'clock. I'll fiddle around with the phone for a few minutes, and then I'll just fall back asleep. But 4 o'clock. Yeah. Usually every morning is like around my time. And somebody said
the witching hour.
Yeah. I studied with William Buhlman, right, up at the Monroe Institute for out-of-body experiences. I think William, Bill, I think is one of the great out-of-body teachers, out-of-body experience teachers in the world today. I studied with him, and he told us over and over again for the whole week that I was there with him every day, first thing in the morning to late at night, and sometimes in the middle of the night, he'd tell us 30 minutes a day, 30 days. Do it religiously, 30 minutes a day for 30 days, and you will have an out-of-body experience. And I'm here to tell you, if I had stopped at day 28, I never would have had my first out-of-body experience, or would have recognized it. So it takes dedication.
So now what are you saying you do for 30 days?
Meditate for 30 days, 30 minutes a day. And I use what they call hemisync music. It's invented by Robert Monroe, the founder of the Monroe Institute. And it's designed, to make a long story short, it's designed to bring the hemispheres of your brain into synchronization. It really helps. There's a question on the screen right now. April is asking people essentially getting locked out of their bodies. Have you heard of that? I would like to say, don't worry about it. It's fine. Except I've had 4 different occasions where I have come across people who have died and haven't seemed to realize that they had died. They weren't in any kind of pain, or they weren't in any kind of great confusion, because time doesn't exist for them. It was just that they weren't quite sure where they were. And 4 different times now, 3 different times, I've had the opportunities of helping them go on to the light. 4th time I didn't, because the person didn't want to leave. That's a long story. That was a great story. That do we have time to share the story with you really quick?
Go for it.
I had a neighbor called me up and said, "Jim, can I come over and talk to you? I've got a problem." And I said, "Yeah, sure." She said, "Last night, in the middle of the night, my son and his wife and their little daughter showed up, and they couldn't stay in their house anymore. And I said, well, why not? And he said, well, because there was too much confusion. The little girl was too scared. There was noise and there was banging and things were falling off the walls and all this kind of stuff. And she said, something is going on. Can you get your dowsing rods and go over? And I said, sure. First, sit down at the table, draw me out. Let me draw out a picture of the thing, and I'll dowse it with my pendulum first and get the idea of where it was. So I got an idea. And the next day we got in the car, we drove over to where this house was. And as I dowsed around the outside of the house, I discovered the dowse was right in, and the house was built right on two places where two energy lines crossed, and it was a natural vortex. The energy was flowing just like a river, this way, and it would be swirling around right here in the middle. So as I went in there, I was aware through meditation. I was aware that there was a presence in the room, and we finally discovered what had happened. In the days of Jim Crow, there was a white woman who lived in the house who fell in love with a black man. And back in those days, this was just not done. And the black man was lynched. And she spent the rest of her life living in this house, a pariah, in love. The love of her life had been lynched right in front of her very own eyes.
Oh.
And when they died, she died in that house. And when they died, they were finally united. And they were together. And they were living in the vortex right there. And they were happy as can be. And I said, do you want to go on? And he said, no, we'll stay here. I said, okay, just don't make so much noise. Just don't scare the kid. So those people, I didn't help those people on because they wanted to stay right where they were. That was fine. But in 3 other cases where I'd had something like this happen, there was I was able to help the people actually go from what I can only describe as a gray area. They had died, but they weren't quite sure they had died. They didn't quite know what had happened. They knew their body wasn't there, and I was able to help them onto the light. And it's called the work of a psychopump is the official word of it. Huh. And really a fascinating time.
Man,
her question just totally shot my meditating to the left. I'm not trying to get locked out of my body. Y'all have to come help me. No, I'm good. I'll try to stay in a little bit longer. I think I'll stay here a little bit longer. I'm not trying to meditate.
Well, it's a crazy thing. I don't want to say this in any way that sounds, morbid or anything, but I'm really looking forward to it. I really am. I'm 75 years old. My body doesn't work the same way it used to. I used to hike and climb mountains and fish and hunt and do all that kind of stuff. And now, I was living through my body. I used to run marathons. I've ridden my bicycle across the country twice, that kind of thing. I lived through my body, and now my body just doesn't work like it used to. It hurts sometimes. Oh, yeah. And I must say, knowing what's on the other side, there's a lot of times I say, I'm ready to go, man, anytime, I'm not going to rush it, but man, I'm set if it should be. I'm lined up, ready to go.
I'd have to say through several of the interviews I've listened to, and even like here, just where you're how many years you were a pastor. Have you ever just like sat back and just thought that 30 years ago, I would have called myself crazy?
Yeah.
For believing the stuff I do now. Because you think about just most pastors, the things that you've just laid out in this last hour are stuff that you ask them, they're like, you'll get some people like, that's of the devil.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what the sad part is? I have been at the bedside of, dozens, maybe even more than that of people who died as they died and came back. And, they died. They were in the hospital, so there was no question about it. They were flatlined. All the instruments hooked up to them, and the nurses came running, and they called for the doctors and a stat and stand back and bounced them and all this kind of stuff. After this was over, and these people were resuscitated after having died, most hospitals nowadays will question them. They'll send somebody in to question them and say, "What happened afterwards?" Well, I did this myself for a long time, especially with people that I knew very well. And I would hear these stories. They would tell me, I saw Jesus. I saw Moses. I saw an angel. I saw my guardian angel. I saw my Aunt Minnie. I saw my Uncle Fred or something like that. And I never believed it. I'm kicking myself now. I never believed it. I would, I didn't say, "Oh, come on, you're crazy. Your brain shut down and it wasn't getting oxygen."
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that. I'm a polite kind of guy, but I didn't believe him. And now I am absolutely kicking myself. The stories they could have told me, the time they could have saved me, had I listened and took them seriously, because I think they were honestly having, near-death experiences. April says again, just because we haven't personally experienced things, we shouldn't give us the right to dismiss others. Absolutely, that's true. That's true. So yeah, I wish I had paid more attention. I wish I had questioned them more thoroughly. I think I would have come around a lot faster than I did. But I'm
kind of put you on the spot. But what would you say was the catalyst, that spark that got you? Like there's always that saying, pull that thread. You see that thread sticking out, you start pulling it, and things just start to unravel. It's hard. I know you do this. What would you?
I may not have time to tell you the whole story in the time we have left, but basically, it was a nude woman on a rock. That was.
That's a cliffhanger. What?
That's. We still got a few minutes, but yeah, we must.
I'll tell you a quick version of this. I'll tell you a quick version of the story. I was a fundamentalist minister who preached the Bible all the time, and my theology was all wrapped up in the Bible. I knew the Bible back and forward and everything else. Down deep inside, I knew there were problems with my interpreting the Bible the way I did. I knew there were problems with how the Bible was being interpreted and how I was preaching it. But one night, I was preparing a sermon, and it all fell apart. If God depends on an inerrant Bible, and you can prove that the Bible has errors in it, then all of a sudden God ceases to exist. And I didn't know what to do. So I went on a retreat. I had built a log cabin up in New Ipswich, New Hampshire. And I had built a log cabin. I went up there for 3 or 4 days. And about the 4th day out, I climbed this mountain just because I wanted to be alone and I wanted to be with my thoughts. And I thought I'd have to leave the ministry because my theology didn't work anymore. And I got up to the top of this mountain, and there was a woman sunbathing on a rock in the nude. And I was sure, I got to get out of here. This is what's more sinful than a naked human body, right? And she says, "Yeah, come on over. Let's talk." And she talked. We sat up there. We talked for about 3 or 4 hours anyway. And we talked about ESP, and we talked about crystals. And she was really interested in what I had to say. And I was fascinated in what she had to say. And halfway through that conversation, I realized for the first time in a long time, I'm having a real serious spiritual discussion with a fellow traveler who was totally different than me. And yet we connected in a fascinating way. There was nothing sexual about, well, maybe a little at first. I was a fundamentalist, but I wasn't dead. But at any rate, at any rate, this was not a meeting of bodies. This was a meeting of minds and spirits and souls. We were just two fellow journeyers on the way. And when I came down off that mountain, it was a different experience. I to this day, I think it's hysterical. God's got a sense of humor, because if you want to take somebody up a mountain just like Moses, and then instead of giving him the 10 Commandments, introduce him to a nude woman on the rock, and come down on a whole new religion, that kind of thing.
I'm telling you, all my hiking stories no longer seem interesting at all.
I told this story on the air once. Now, this happened years ago. I wrote about it in my first book, Journey Home. But I told the story on the air once, and lo and behold, I got a call that the woman thinks she knows the woman who I met, because this woman came down. She was a real free spirit. She knew exactly where it was, Middle Barrett Mountain in New Ipswich, New Hampshire. She came down and told the story afterwards about how, man, I met this minister up on the hill. I think I blew his mind. I hope I didn't hurt him at all. Little did she know. So it wasn't an angel. It was a real, pure, real person.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
for me, I just like because where I was thinking, like for me, the one that really started my questioning was I was raised really religious, and I went to a seminary school, Portland Bible College, up
Oh
in
yeah,
Portland,
sure.
Oregon.
Oh yeah.
And so one of the things I started to ask some questions, and I asked, one of the ones that I asked him, and I've used this for a few people, like examples, was when the devil was tempting Jesus in the stories.
Mhm.
And I've commonly told him, and I was like, okay, if you go back here, they know that we're going to win. You go through a little, like around. It's like, so this is like my son negotiating with me. Okay, so Dad, now if you let me do this, I'm going to let you have all of this house.
Yeah,
You're like,
yeah,
wait,
yeah,
I own the house. I go,
yeah.
what are you negotiating with here? I'm like, this, you have no power. I mean, so at that point, I started questioning. I'm like, this story makes no sense.
Yeah.
He's tempting me with something that I already own. So
Yeah.
where's the temptation? I go,
Yeah.
so, and I, at that point, things really started to unravel for me after that part.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that,
That's a great story. In my book, Faith, Trust, and Belief, I use that story. I give my own version of that story about Jesus and the devil were out in the wilderness. It's called Faith, Trust, and Belief: A Trilogy of the Spirit. And I use that story as the basis of one whole chapter. It's a great, great story. You were right to question too. Yeah, there it is, right there.
yep. He beat me to it. I was starting to scrolling down there too. So I asked got it. But yeah, that's awesome that you use that same one, because that's the one that for me that was the catalyst, and then the one that really kicked it in overdrive, and I think it did for a few people, was Da Vinci Code.
Yeah, yeah,
With Dan
yeah.
Brown, and that's
That
when
had a huge impact. Huge impact. Yeah.
a lot of people are like, "Wow, that was just sensational." I'm like, no, it really has a question. So like, if you even go into it, if you believe that what it says literally, he came down for the human experience to go through what a human does to that. Why wouldn't he get married?
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
wouldn't you go through that experience of love? Why wouldn't you experience one of the key emotions that we as humans in this life,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And
you wouldn't experience that.
And then you got to ask yourself the same question. Why did Jesus say, "What, know ye not that ye all are gods?" And he calls us brothers and sisters. There we are. we're
and that
we're living the experience, living the dream.
And that's what I like, is if more people could come to this part. I mean, I think a lot of people would realize, the dogma thing is so pointless, where mine is the only way, yours is ridiculous. It's like, if you look at the basis of most, whether it is Hinduism, whether it is Buddhism, whether it just you go through this, there's underlying themes that span everything. And you're like, we should start connecting these commonalities and realizing the only difference that we're trying to make is that, that we're adding these little things to it and saying that's what matters. No, let's get down to what is the actual, like I said, the saying, brass tacks. Get down to the brass tacks.
That exactly is the theme of a talk that I have on my YouTube page about one ring to rule them all. It's a PowerPoint type thing, but I the whole point is to make that point that you just made, and it's really, I think, important. My YouTube page has a lot of the stuff that we've talked about tonight, YouTube videos that we've done. My daughter, Jan, puts together the artwork, and I just do the content and talk, and then she does all the rest. But a lot of these things are right there on that page, and I think people might find a lot of resonance there. Nothing new. I never had an original idea in my life, I don't think. But in terms of bringing together what some real experts have said about this, it really does help.
And so at jimwillis.author is the way.
Yeah, I think you've got the Facebook page up there right now. Yeah.
Yep.
It's the YouTube page is
the YouTube.
Well, if you just go to YouTube, type in Jim Willis, and then scroll down till you find my little picture there in a little circle, and you'll find all kinds of videos there.
Look at this. We're watching ourselves at the same time. Whoa. We're gonna start doing that loop.
I'll start that.
Yeah, so it's like, so I can do that for you. Just type in just Jim.
Yeah, just type in Jim Willis, and then click on that.
Yep, it should.
Just click on Jim Willis, and then
See, that's not you.
No, go down to the dozen or so. I'm not up there yet. You'll find my picture in a little.
There it is.
Right there. Just click on that picture.
And do what I'm doing right now. Click.
Oh, subscribe. Sure.
Why have you not
and you
done
go over
it
here.
already?
You go over here to the notification bell.
Yes.
Oh.
Then you'll be told every time a new one comes out.
That's right. So there it is. So this is Jim.
And if you click on that, no, that's right.
This is Jim. This is not Jim. This is a different Jim.
Jim's the guy with the fourth beard.
That's right.
So click on my picture, and it'll come up with all these different.
There you go. Well, awesome. Well, Jim, it has been a pleasure, sir.
It's been great being with you guys. I just really enjoyed it. I don't know what you guys have been talking about with my daughter, but she called me up tonight. She says, "You're going to love this one tonight."
I've been emailing her back and forth, and she's just like, "Oh, what do we need?" And it's been a real pleasure, talking with her. And so
she's fantastic.
And if you're up for it, I mean, I can't speak for the guys just without talking to them here, but I mean, I would love to have you back on.
Anytime.
Yeah, I mean, you endeared yourself to all of us, especially when you started telling us that you're up as a minister, you're having a spiritualist talk with a nude woman on a rock, just out of the blue. I go, that right there was just like, oh, this is fantastic.
Well, no, this was fun. Anytime, just give Jan a call; she'll set it up.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate that. So thanks again for coming on. Blessings to you and your family. You guys,
thank you.
Take care.
Stay safe, y'all.
Yep, we will. Thanks, sir.
Bye now.
Thank you.
I mess around too much.
All right, everybody. This was a fun episode. Like I said, please go check him out. JimWillis.net. Support him. Amazon.com. Pick up some book. Pick up the books. Go to his site. That was an awesome conversation.
It was.
From the beginning all the way to that fantastic story at the end. I mean that's just
cannot. That was a cliffhanger that cannot be held. It had to be said. No.
Yeah, I know. I was the same thing. It's like I said, no, we cannot stop on this one at all. So, everybody, go to our site. We have threebeerspodcast.com. Check us out on social media. We have YouTube, Facebook. Obviously, you're here. Go Twitter, Instagram. Pinterest. We're even on Pinterest. And then we just got some awesome beard samples from another one, J&J Beard Company out of New Jersey. They sent us some samples to try those and see what we thought. So those just showed up. Austin's got those. We're also going to be rebroadcast on Patriot, their internet radio station, Patriot Radio on Zeno app. So load that, and listen to us. That's replayed on Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So check that out. Nanny Cakes 407 on Facebook. Give her a phone call in the Central Florida area, 407-923-2898. If you mention Three Beards, she's going to give you 15% off your cake order, which for anybody that's looking for wedding cakes, for birthday cakes, I mean, that's a pretty substantial savings. Yeah, so definitely, reach out to her. She makes amazing cakes. Patreon.com. If you guys like that thing that we just laid out, this one, we'll show it on the next episode tonight too. But if you like that, that's coming to Patreon, throwing the pennies our way. That's what is going to help us make, really cool stuff like that. Cause that's thing. So, and like I said, Jan just caught that she was watching. So thanks again for watching. But everybody, have a great night. Stay tuned. We'll be back with the next one, and we talk to you later. Good night.
Good night.